They found them seated at the table, not fallen, not struggling, still sitting upright, as if the meal had simply paused. The candles had burned low, drowning the room in wax and shadow. Plates were half finished. Silverware rested where hands had dropped it. One man's mouth was still open, frozen in the middle of a word he never finished. Outside, the cicadas screamed like nothing was wrong. Inside the main house of the Hawthorne Plantation near Natchez, Mississippi, 14 people were dead before midnight. No fire, no gunshots, no signs of a struggle, just silence. By dawn, whispers spread across the river road. The master, his wife, 2 children, a visiting preacher, even the overseer, all dead after supper. The town called it a sickness. The church called it God's will. But the enslaved people on the property knew better. They had seen Clara in the kitchen that night. They had watched her stir the pot slowly, calmly, like she had all the time in the world. And they remembered the way she smiled to herself when no one was looking. Because Clara of Natchez did not poison them in anger. She poisoned them with purpose. And this was not the first time death had eaten at that table. Clara arrived at Hawthorne Plantation in 1819. No one knew where she came from. She was young, maybe 16, maybe younger, thin, quiet, her back already bent like someone twice her age. The trader who brought her said she had no family worth mentioning. That was a lie. Clara had a past, and it followed her like a shadow. From the beginning, people noticed something wrong. She never cried, not when whipped, not when punished, not when her name was taken and replaced with something easier to say. She watched everything. Older enslaved women said Clara listened like someone counting steps, measuring rooms, learning routines, learning people. She was placed in the big house kitchen. That was where power lived. Food was prepared there. Medicine too. Teas, tonics, remedies whispered about, but never written down. Clara learned which leaves soothed pain, which roots slowed the heart, which powders made the stomach twist until breath stopped. Knowledge passed quietly between women. Knowledge the masters never bothered to see. At night, Clara sat by the hearth long after others slept. She stared into the coals like she was remembering something older than the plantation itself. One woman later said Clara whispered names into the fire, names that did not belong to anyone living. Hawthorne Plantation was not new. Before cotton, it was land taken from the dead, a burial ground for people erased long before deeds were written. The house was built where bones were turned into foundation. Strange things happened there. Children fell sick for no reason. Livestock refused to drink from certain wells. Servants heard footsteps in empty halls. Every death was explained away. Fever, accident, weak blood. But death lingered like mold in the walls. Clara noticed patterns. She noticed which rooms felt heavy, which corners smelled like rot even when clean, which prayers the family said before meals, and which ones they never finished. The Hawthorne family believed they were protected. Their wealth, their church, their bloodline. They believed God sat at their table. Clara knew something else was hungry there, and she knew how to feed it. The dinner was meant to celebrate a baptism. A preacher from town had come to bless the household. Wine flowed freely. Meat was roasted thick and red. Clara prepared every dish herself. No one questioned it. They trusted her hands. They trusted her silence. As the meal began, Clara stood in the corner of the room, watching. One by one, faces changed. Laughter slowed. Words slurred. Breathing became shallow, uneven. The youngest child reached for water that never came. The preacher tried to pray. He collapsed face first into his plate. Within minutes, the table was full of bodies. Clara waited until the last breath left the room. Then she stepped forward, gathered the untouched plates, and carried them back into the kitchen. She washed the dishes. She cleaned the knives. She wiped the table where death had eaten. And before dawn, Clara was gone. No footprints. No blood. No record. Only a plantation that never held another supper again. Before Clara ever stepped into the Hawthorne kitchen, girls had been disappearing along the river. Not runaways. Not sold. They vanished between sermons and Sundays. Local records mention them only once. A name, an age, then nothing. No death notice. No sale record. No burial. They were sent to the church orphan house outside Natchez. Officially, it was a place of care, a place of prayer. But the women whispered a different name for it. They called it the quiet house. Clara had been there. She never spoke of it. But at night, when she slept, she screamed through clenched teeth. Not loud enough to wake the house. just enough to prove she was reliving something that never let her go. Inside that orphan house, girls were taught obedience through scripture, silence through hunger, purity through fear. They were beaten for asking questions. They were punished for remembering their old names. Some never left. Clara did, and she carried the orphan house with her wherever she went. In the Hawthorne kitchen, there was a cabinet no one touched. Inside it sat a book with no title, no words on its pages, just symbols burned into the paper, shapes that looked like knots, roots, and broken crosses twisted together. The mistress believed it was nonsense, a relic from a previous owner. Clara knew better. She had seen those markings before, scratched into the walls of the orphan house cellar, carved into bed frames, hidden behind prayer boards. The book wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be remembered. Clara traced the symbols with her finger late at night. Her lips moved silently, as if reciting something she had been forced to learn as a child. That book taught balance. What to take, what to give back, how death listens when it is fed correctly. The church had confiscated it once, then quietly returned it to the plantation. Because some knowledge is too useful to destroy. Clara didn't begin with the Hawthorne family. That came later. Her first test was small. A cup of tea for the overseer who enjoyed punishment too much. A man who believed pain was proof of order. She added crushed seed to his drink. Just enough. He didn't die. Instead, he spent 3 days unable to speak. His tongue swollen, his eyes wide with fear. He lived, but something inside him broke. Clara watched him carefully. Death was not always the goal. Control was. She learned dosage, timing, reaction. She learned how poison could erase a man without killing him. And she learned that no one suspected the girl who never spoke. After the plantation deaths, the church moved quickly. Too quickly. The bodies were buried within 24 hours. No autopsies. No investigation. The preacher's death was labeled divine mystery. During Sunday service, the pastor warned the congregation not to speculate. Curiosity, he said, was the devil's doorway. That same week, records vanished. Birth ledgers altered. Death logs rewritten. Clara's name scratched out and replaced with a blank line. As if silence could undo what happened. As if God hadn't been sitting at that table too. The church did not hunt Clara. They feared her. Because she had learned what they had buried. And she had proven she could use it. Not everyone forgot. Older women along the river spoke Clara's name in whispers. They left bowls of food outside at night. Not for spirits, but for her. Some swore they saw her years later. Older, calmer, watching from tree lines, standing near kitchens, always near food, always near churches. Clara was no longer a person. She was a warning. Hawthorne Plantation was abandoned within 5 years. No one could sleep there. Meals spoiled faster than they should. Livestock sickened. Guests refused to stay the night. Something had been fed there. And once fed, it wanted more. Clara never returned to Hawthorne. She didn't need to. The knowledge had already spread. There was a language spoken in kitchens that masters never learned. It wasn't written. It wasn't spoken aloud. It lived in gestures, in pauses, in how long a spoon stirred before it stopped, in which herbs were placed first and which were added last. Clara became fluent. Women from nearby plantations began to recognize her, not by face, but by method, the way she moved, the way she prepared food without tasting it. They shared recipes that were not meant to nourish. A stew for obedience, a tea for forgetting, a broth that made sleep come heavy and final. Each recipe carried memory, pain passed hand to hand, generation to generation, hidden inside care. Food was the only place they had control. Clara taught them how to use it. After Hawthorne, Clara did not poison entire households again. That kind of death made noise. She learned restraint. One death caused questions. 14 caused fear. Fear brought eyes. So Clara changed. She began choosing who deserved to vanish quietly. A preacher who beat girls behind locked doors. A plantation owner who sold children away one by one. A doctor who experimented on bodies that could not refuse. Each death looked natural. Stroke, heart failure, sudden weakness. No patterns, no suspicion, only relief in places that never spoke it aloud. Clara wasn't angry anymore. She was careful. In 1832, a fire damaged a small church outside Natchez. When repairs began, workers found something under the floor. A sealed tunnel. Inside were old sleeping mats, shackles, scratched prayers on stone walls, and symbols matching the book from Hawthorne's kitchen. The church elders ordered it sealed immediately. No mention in town records. But Clara had already been there. She had learned that the church did not just preach obedience. It practiced it. Girls were brought underground to be corrected. Their fear-fed rituals disguised as prayer. That hunger again. Always hunger. By the 1840s, Clara no longer used her name. Names tied people down. She moved between towns, between kitchens, between churches, sometimes as help, sometimes as charity. Always welcomed, always trusted. People felt calmer around her, as if she carried certainty, as if something old and patient walked beside her. Children stopped crying when she entered a room. Men avoided her eyes. Animals went still. She aged slowly, or maybe not at all. Those who tried to remember her face later could not. Only her presence. There was one recipe Clara never shared. Not because it was too dangerous, but because it required intent. It required the cook to truly mean it. This recipe did not kill quickly. It did not cause pain. It made a person sit still while death unfolded inside them. The Hawthorne supper used it, and Clara never repeated it, because feeding that hunger too much made it stronger. And Clara understood balance. In 1857, a riverboat cook swore a woman helped him prepare supper during a storm. She worked silently, perfectly. That night, a corrupt judge aboard the ship collapsed mid-meal and died before reaching shore. The woman was gone by morning. No one else remembered her, except the cook. He quit his job and burned his utensils. He said some meals should never be served again. For years, Clara believed she was in control, that she chose, that she decided who lived and who vanished. But hunger is patient, and hunger remembers who feeds it. It began subtly. Food spoiled faster around her. Animals avoided her path. Fires went out when she entered kitchens late at night. The symbols she once traced easily now felt wrong beneath her fingers, hot, almost alive. She dreamed of the Hawthorne table again. Only now, the chairs were empty, and something waited at the head. Clara started seeing a child in her dreams. A girl from the orphan house. Small, starved, eyes too old for her face. The girl never spoke. She only watched Clara prepare meals over and over, as if asking a question Clara refused to answer. Finally, in one dream, the girl pointed at Clara's hands. They were stained black, not with blood, with something deeper. Clara woke shaking. She had taken power from a place that always demands payment, and it had come to collect. In 1861, Clara accepted work at one final house. A quiet family. No cruelty. No hidden rooms. No screaming at night. For the first time, she felt unsure. The hunger stirred anyway. It did not care about justice. Only feeding. That night, Clara prepared supper. Halfway through, her hands stopped moving. She understood then. This was never about revenge. It was about being used. She dumped the pot into the fire. The flames roared unnaturally high. And for the first time, Clara said no. Clara left before dawn. No one saw her again. No body was ever found. But the kitchens went quiet. Recipes were forgotten. Symbols faded. The hunger starved. Mostly. Even now, in old houses near Natchez, people report strange things. Meals left untouched. Silverware set for one too many. A feeling of being watched while eating alone. And sometimes, late at night, a woman is seen standing near the stove. Not cooking, just watching, making sure no one feeds it again. After Clara vanished, Natchez rewrote itself. County books from the 1820s and 1830s show strange gaps. Entire households listed as relocated. Deaths marked with vague causes. Names crossed out without explanation. Clara's name appears once, then never again. It's not an accident. Histories are not written to remember pain. They are written to protect power. A story like Clara's breaks the order of things. It proves control was never complete. That silence could be weaponized. That the smallest hands in the room could decide who lived to finish their meal. So they erased her. Or tried to. Stories don't need ink to live. They survive in kitchens. In warnings whispered to children. In the way elders flinch when someone jokes about poisoning. Among the enslaved, Clara became something else. Not a killer. Not a ghost. A boundary. A reminder that even in systems built on absolute control, something always leaks through the cracks. Choice. The hunger did not disappear. It weakened. It moved. It learned new shapes. Institutions changed names. Churches rebuilt. Orphan houses became schools. Kitchens became factories. But hunger is adaptable. It feeds on silence. on obedience, on systems that decide some lives are expendable. Clara did not destroy it. She interrupted it. An interruption was enough. Clara was never meant to be remembered as human. Humans can be dismissed, judged, explained away. What Clara became was harder to swallow. She became refusal. The moment when someone stops obeying a script written for their suffering. She became the reason certain recipes were never written down. Why some elders still say prayers before meals they don't fully believe in. Why some houses feel uneasy at dinner. Every society eats at a table built by unseen hands. Someone prepares the meal. Someone decides who is fed. Someone decides who is forgotten. Clara's story reminds us that food is never just food. It is trust. It is power. It is memory. And sometimes it is judgment. There is no proof Clara poisoned anyone. Not in court. Not in records. Not in history books. That's the most disturbing part. Because it means the truth lived where evidence couldn't follow. In bodies. In fear. In silence. Some stories don't disappear because they aren't true. They disappear because they are too true. They threaten the lie that control was clean. That cruelty went unanswered. That obedience was natural. Clara of Natchez proved otherwise. So she was buried without a grave. Even now, people report a strange rule passed down in old Southern families. Never insult the cook. Never waste food. Never assume the quiet ones aren't watching. No one remembers why, but the rule remains. If this story unsettled you, it should. Not because of poison, but because of how easily people overlook who truly holds power until it's too late. Clara did not haunt houses. She haunted systems. And those systems still eat every day. The question is not whether Clara existed. The question is, who is cooking now?